I was coming back from a friend's house. It was about 2 a.m. when I left, and I had a bit of a drive, mostly freeway. I was the only one on the freeway, zoning out and listening to George Norrie. I didn't notice another car had joined me until they were riding right on my tail. I thought it was odd that they wouldn't just pass me since we were the only cars in sight. The car moved to the left lane, and I was relieved that they decided to go around me. Until they didn't. Instead of passing me, the car stayed at my same exact speed, parallel to me. I thought it was a little odd, but it was probably just an accident on their part. The car was nothing special, just an old black car with a solo male driver. I decided to give the guy some space, and I slowed down to about 60 miles per hour. From the left lane, he too slowed down until once again we were side by side. So I sped up this time to nearly 80 now. Within seconds, he gained speed and was right next to me again. Now it was clear to me that this was no mistake. The only thing on my mind was not being alone with his car. I sped up trying to catch up with any other cars on the road. Way ahead in the distance, I saw a tow truck, which became my target. As I raced to reach the truck, the car was parallel to me the entire time. I reached the truck just in time to see it signal and take the exit off the freeway. My mind was racing with every news story of drive-by shootings I had heard, when I noticed a police car parked in the distance. The black car must have noticed it as well, because he dropped way back behind me and got into the right lane. As soon as we both had passed the police car, the black car wasted no time in catching right back up. In hindsight, I probably should have pulled up behind the police car, but I had no idea what I would say. I was being driven next to? I had to lose this guy though. So I slammed on the gas and I was going about 95. He was too going 95 right next to me. I was so scared and I was driving way too fast and I didn't know what to do. I grabbed my phone and started to dial 911. He must have seen the light from my screen because immediately he dropped way behind me until I almost couldn't even see his lights. I sped up and took my exit, racing home. I was a little nervous that he saw where I got off, but I sped home so I don't think he was following me. I don't think there's anything I can do about it, except think twice about driving late at night. Two years ago, when my autistic daughter had trouble sleeping at night, she was only 1.5 at the time, I would occasionally toss her in the car seat and drive her around. It was one of the only ways she fell asleep soundly, and I lived with my parents in a nice neighborhood. So one night I'm driving, and my girl had finally fallen asleep. It's about 9 p.m. at this point. So I was hungry and I wanted to let her fall into a deeper sleep so I could move her. I get some food from a drive-thru and I pull over onto a side street right next to the restaurant so I can eat. I'm finishing eating and I look back to check on my kid. And suddenly, these super bright headlights pull up behind me a little too close. I wave apologetically. None of my windows are tinted and I used to drive a Jeep Compass, so the back window was big enough for them to see me. Assuming whoever it is trying to park at the house I'm currently in front of. So I pull away and I start down the street. And once I'm at the end of the block and around the corner, I see headlights again. No big deal though, because this is a semi-busy side street, so people cut down this way all the time. Only this person is riding my ass like I'm not moving fast enough. And I get annoyed after a second and I change lanes to get out of their way. Almost as soon as I do, they follow. At this point, I realize that the car is the same sedan that had pulled up behind me on the last street. But now they are too close for me to see the make of the car, and the high beams are on so I can't see anything behind me. I curse myself for not paying better attention to the car before. I didn't want to be crazy paranoid, so I took a few unnecessary side streets and passed my neighborhood, only for this person to be behind me turn for turn and lane change for lane change. So I panicked and called my dad. I know I should have called the police, but I was 21 and did the first thing I could think of. He was at work, 30 minutes away. He had terrible reception and decided to call me back on the landline at his work, and he was on the cell phone with the sheriff's department for our neighborhood, and they tell me to drive to the station. It's been close to 40 minutes since the person had started following me and kept riding me closer and closer. At this point, I was running lights and swerving around, just trying to catch someone's attention. So I make it to the station safely and no one is there. Not one car. No cruisers, no one in the department office. Not even any cars in the small parking lot. and they want me to pull into the lot and wait for an officer. I was completely alone. My 1-year-old is now fussing in the back seat, and there's only one way in or out of the parking lot. I noped past the station and told my dad to tell the officer on the phone to screw off because no one was there. I see a sheriff's car finally at the light ahead and start to honk and flash my lights as he drives across the intersection I am driving to. He either misses what I'm doing or ignores it. It's now been a little over an hour and the person has practically tapped my ass 4 times. Eventually, I saw another sheriff's car and just laid on my horn, and I think he caught on because he busted a U-turn and came back towards us. As he did, the car behind me disappeared into the mall across the street, and the officer followed. I was instructed to go back to the station and wait, so I did. And eventually, I was waiting so long that I went inside, triple locking the door of my car because I was terrified. The office had no one except a no emergency phone on the desk, and that only connected me to other extensions. To wrap the story up, they made me feel crazy and said they never found the car, that all they could do was take a statement since technically nothing happened. I beg to differ with that. And he offered to follow me and my daughter home, only to drive away as soon as I parked, while I was left to take my sleeping kid inside and shaking so hard I couldn't even unlock the door. I run upstairs to my mom's room. She was on pain medication after a surgical procedure, so she was asleep. I shake her awake and I was sobbing and I told her what happened. It took me 2 days to sleep again at night, and to this day I refuse to do night drives with my daughter. So near where I live, but far out into the sticks, there's a glorified gravel path in the woods called Rube Hill. It runs maybe 3 miles long, and only a half mile of it is paved. On the south end is the pavement, with a few old but otherwise normal houses dotting it, deceptively average at that point. The houses end, the pavement ends, and the gravel road shoots up a steep hill. But it's not taken care of at all, and the gravel is piled up in potholes and berms. So unless you're driving a nice off-road vehicle, it's best to take it easy. So since you need to drive slowly, you'd get a nice clear view of the handmade signs nailed to the trees with messages like, "No trespassing" and "We are watching you," scrawled in Sharpie on them. At the top of the hill, the road winds lazily for a little under a mile, before diving back down the other side of the hill. The gravel is in equally crappy condition on this side. After you reach the bottom of the hill, the road cuts straightish for about a mile through cornfields, before intersecting with another road. The reason I am so familiar with the layout is that I have often taken friends on late night drives to this road to try to scare the crap out of them. Never an elaborate prank. I'd just drive slowly and play creepy music and get them amped up and paranoid. I always made sure to talk about the meth heads and their labs out there too, and how the sheriffs try to avoid going there because it's dangerous. I figured it was mostly bullshit and just stories, but I think now there's an element of truth to some of the rumors. I was with my friend Aaron one night and we decided to go on a late night drive to Rube Hill to freak ourselves out. So we took off, drove down the various country highways and the back roads, and we turned onto it. I made sure to play extra creepy music since me and Aaron had made the trip before. It honestly lost its creepy luster on me by then for the most part, but I still enjoyed the long drives and scaring my friends. Of course, it mostly went by uneventful, and we were almost across the hill, about to descend the other side when Aaron freaked out. I checked my mirrors to see what he was shitting a fist over, and I saw truck headlights down the road. The truck made it under the only streetlight on top of the hill, a really dim orange light. I could see it was kicking up a ton of dirt. It was speeding towards us. I paused the music and sure enough, with the windows down, I could hear the gravel crunching and flying like a vehicle was speeding. Keep in mind that I've driven down this road dozens of times, both during the day and at night, and I had never encountered another vehicle. So having a truck speeding to seemingly catch up to us at midnight on a road lousy with rumored meth heads was pretty jarring. Usually I didn't relinquish my brakes driving down that hill, but this time I didn't even touch them. So the next day I'm hanging out with another friend, Chris. Chris and I are just lounging around playing video games, talking about quantum physics, Chris's favorite thing, and Chipotle, my favorite thing. I of course told him all about Aaron and I getting chased the previous night, and I kind of hyped it up. I made it come across as a little bit more harrowing than it really was. But now Chris wanted to go to the road. So we waited until late that night, about 2 in the morning probably, and went to Rube Hill. This time I wasn't playing any music because I wanted to be more alert. It was all going quite normally, just like usual, when I slammed on my brakes. I threw the car in park and just said, you see that too, right? I looked at Chris, and he was just as confused as me, and he just nodded. My headlights were clearly illuminating a thick metal cable stretched across the road. On the right, it was wrapped around a tree at what I'd guess was roughly head height for a standing adult. And it was pulled taut across the road and anchored to a fence post at roughly chest height. I had no idea what to make of it or how to react when I heard gravel being thrown by tires. I checked my mirrors, and sure enough, truck headlights were tearing ass down the road from behind us. I started freaking out, with my breathing and heart rate going out of control, and I began sweating. Chris just swore under his breath quietly. I threw it into drive, pulled as far to the right as I could, and my low-sitting car slid under the cable with a loud metal-on-metal scraping noise. I absolutely cringed as I heard the scrape. So again, I flew down the hill, and this is the creepy cherry on the sundae for me personally, because Chris didn't see it. As we left the tree line and entered the cornfields, I glanced to my right past Chris, and I briefly caught a glimpse of somebody standing about 3 or 4 feet back in the corn. I just felt my stomach scrunch up, and I floored the accelerator. I glanced in my rear view mirror, and I could see a man standing in the road behind us, illuminated by the moon and my taillights. He had a long object slung over his shoulder. Couldn't tell if it was a cane or maybe a rifle, but I didn't want to stay to find out. Before I could even tell Chris about it, we were around a bend and out of sight. I haven't been back to that road since then.